I'm back. I hit a wrong button because I'm silly. I am completely silly and I hit a wrong button. So I'm giving you guys chance to come back on. I am so silly. Okay, letting the audience build, but I'm not seeing anyone come back on. So let me see here. Okay, I see one person came back on. If you could let me know in chat if this is on both YouTube and Facebook. I hit a wrong button, like a silly pants, just like the silly pants that put the glove on the wrong thing. I'll have to piece these together in post production. But we're going to continue, and I am so sorry I hit the wrong button. Just to explain, I have these scenes set up, and I'm supposed to hit it. Awesome, James. So I'm sure it's on YouTube too. I'm supposed to hit it so that it just goes to the next scene, and I must have hit the wrong thing and put end broadcast. Derp. Okay, so let's continue here with where we were at.
What did this look like in actual salary? So, come to find out, the women actually earned more money than the men in total pay, but also on a per game basis. The men's national team are actually the ones being underpaid based on the numbers. And one of the more interesting pieces about this is if the teams switch contracts, the women's national team would have gotten paid more under the men's deal, but the men's national team would have also been paid more under the women's deal. Now, after the judge threw out this lawsuit, Joe Biden wrote this to the women's U.S. national team: don't give up the fight, this is not over. And to U.S. soccer, equal pay now, or else when I'm president, you can go elsewhere for World Cup funding.
Hey, we shouldn't be funding fucking World Cup. Sorry. Just the stealing my money for shit that I don't even watch just really burns my biscuits. But Joe Biden, you're a liar. The women made more than the men. Stop kissing female ass for no reason. There is legitimate issues in the world in which women get the shaft, just like there's legitimate issues in the world where the men get the shaft. Don't lie. Don't lie, Pinocchio. Find an actual issue. My God. Okay, I think that might be it for this guy, and we're going to go on to another segment, but I'm not sure. Let's find out.
And we see this in school constantly when teachers like, all right, uh, this is what we're going to discuss. Here's the range. They do it over and over. They rehearse you, but that gets people ready for not be creative thinkers and to basically say, all right, the menu has been chosen for me, always by some elite, usually unaccountable to anyone. And now I have to pick from these choices. Well, if I'm a vegetarian and I'm at this steakhouse, I don't want to eat these sides. Well, too bad, social contract. That to me does not sound very coherent. So as soon as enough people realize that this is something that has legs, it's going to be very easy to get a lot of what we want, for the simple reason that an informed, educated, and motivated cadre is going to be much more efficacious than a mass population which doesn't really have any ideas of its own and is just going to follow the trends of the moment.
Okay, so the context here is that Michael Malice is talking to, that's Jason Stapleton, on Anarchy. And I got to tell you several observations here. I don't care for Jason Stapleton's new show. Part of it could be because I am a bit salty about the way he left his other show and the way he screwed the people that were in the Jason Stapleton group. And I know he's going to get all mad at me because he gets mad when I say things that he doesn't necessarily agree with or has a different point of view. This is just a different point of view. The people in that group did feel screwed with the way he just abandoned them. He got them all riled up and gave them all these visions of this plans he had for this libertarian activism thing. And I get it. Your life changes. You can't always do everything. but he didn't really explain it to them. It was very cocky and arrogant. But even though I don't care for his new show, Wealth, Power, and Influence, to me, the name is just so pretentious. Jason's attitude, though, is not as cocky as it used to be. He's much more humble than he used to be, and I do like the new attitude. Because it used to be when you talked to him about anarchy, he was just an asshole. And at least he was, when I saw he had Michael Malice on about it, I thought he was just going to be a big asshole to Michael Malice. And he wasn't. He was very, very respectful. So I want to give credit where credit is due. The fact that I don't like his new show, that's not anything on him. It's just not my cup of tea. You know, it's just not my type of subject matter. I loved his old show. It's just I'm not his target audience. That so that it's just stating a, you know, I like vanilla ice cream rather than chocolate type thing. But I really liked the way he interacted with Michael Malice. And Michael was saying he was taking Jason to task basically for saying anarchism was some kind of utopian thing, and Malice was telling him what the actual problem was, the way we're indoctrinated. And how crazy is it if you were a vegetarian, but the menu was set for you and none of it was vegetarian, and so you have to eat meat because social contract. And I just thought it was such a great argument that got down to first principles as to what the actual issue is. And again, kudos to Jason for being respectful to him. I think my next clip, though, I didn't realize Mr. Kingpilled, who I'd watched some of his other content, and I know I'm sounding so critical today. Am I being bitchy? Maybe I'm being a little bitchy. I've had insomnia really bad. But I can tell you, I'm sure that guy's a great guy in person. I don't like pretentiousness at all. As you can tell, one thing I am not is pretentious. Like, I am cussing, whatever, just, you know, your average, everyday. I don't like pretentiousness at all. And that guy, Mr. Kingpill, strikes me as pretentious. It might just be how he is. Some people think the words I use can be a little pretentious now that I think about it, because I just happen to be blessed to grow up around books, so I have a pretty large vocabulary. And to people who don't have the same vocabulary, I can come off as pretentious. So I get it. This isn't, again, I'm not attacking him as a person. I'm just saying the style isn't something I like. The second part of the style is it's word salad. It's blah, 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 and I can't take that. I had enough of that with Mike Shipley. Mike Shipley ruined me for word salad for the rest of my life. But I also tend to think word salad is a way to make yourself sound smarter than you are. You're usually not half as smart as you think you are. So, again, this isn't, I've never met him. It's just not my style. Most of this is a style critique. Some people don't like listening to women with pink hair. It's just a style thing. But it just rubs me the wrong way. So Michael Malice is talking about when he goes to certain events and people get to ask him questions. You know, Michael with his autism jokes, which I think are hilarious, and I have autism, will say, "Oh my God, I can't deal with these autists. They lead off their question with like these novels of explanation, and it's just like, get to the question already." And after Michael says this, immediately after, that's what Matt does. He does this blah, 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 before he gets to the question. And I'm like, oh my God. It just turned me off really badly. Let me check out the comments here. So I believe that's the next clip. Yeah, so Daniel, I'm going to put these up here because not everyone can see them. Says Matt is definitely comes across as a little intellectually elitist. I think more than a little, but I think he's a good dude. Don't know him, probably is. Yep, the word salad. Oh my God, I just want to puke. Yep, I agree with Joe here. When you talk like that, to me, it's to impress yourself. Sorry, that's just my opinion. So, um, let me remove this from the podcast. How do I? Okay, so let's see if I have the clip order right, and we're gonna dine on word salad right now.
Wow, that's impressive.
Oh, maybe not. What happened to it?
The person I was most impressed.
Come on, I had this clip.
And we see this in school constantly when teachers
Where
like, all
is
right,
it? It might be
this
coming
is what
up.
we're going to discuss. Here's the range. They do it over and over.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's coming up here somewhere. I have it out of order. When we see Matt, you'll see what I mean. I feel like an idiot now. I feel like an overly verbose, intellectually elitist idiot for introducing it, and it doesn't even come up. That's God's way of keeping me humble, I think. I know it's in this here somewhere, but let's just continue. You know me, I just jumble all these clips together. But I'm going to be dealing with a lot more, Matt, because people have asked me to, but my patience is going to run real thin because all I hear is Mike Shipley.
Wow, that's impressive.
I'll tell you the person I was most impressed with, who I completely did not expect.
It seems like these clips went out of order on me
Senator
somehow.
Cynthia Lummis, excuse me, who I had never heard of.
Yeah, what state is she from?
She's from Wyoming. She's a first term U.S. senator, so she's in her first year. Just got elected in these last elections. I had no idea who she was. I saw on my schedule there's a senator who I'm introducing today, and that's enough to kind of get your attention. Like, oh, look, a senator. And I figured she'd be some Republican freedom senator. Yeah. She'd say, hey, we should lower taxes, and capitalism is better than socialism, or something like that.
The liberals.
So I go up there, and she's got her guy, like her chief of staff or advisor, or whoever the guy with her is this guy, Tyler Lindholm. And he is, so I go backstage, and someone was like, oh, here, let me introduce you to the senator. And we start walking over toward him, and this Tyler guy, this huge, big, military looking guy, with like a cowboy hat and boots on and everything. And he literally looks at me, makes eye contact, and he goes, no way, Dave Smith. Oh, dude, it's so nice to meet you. I'm a huge fan. And he goes, I'm a huge fan of yours. He goes, dude, did you see Scott Horton last night? He was so great, and blah, blah, blah. He goes, oh, it's such a bummer Tom Woods couldn't be here. And, and so right away, I'm like, whoa. What? Like,
he's naming all the unverified people and not the blue checks that matter. That's really
that's exactly right. Yes,
but that's why she's the junior senator. That's not why. That's not why.
So right away, I'm kind of like, well, this is not what I expected at all. Like, okay, and I was like, oh, thank you, very nice to meet you. Talk to the senator for a few minutes. I introduce her on stage. She goes on and gives a 30-minute speech about monetary policy.
No,
I'm talking.
Are you serious?
Michael, she was excellent. She starts talking about fiat currency, fractional reserve banking, the destruction it holds over the economy, and how much power it gives the political class. Starts talking about how the answer is Bitcoin and 100% reserve requirements on banking. I mean, like, I'm sitting there just like with my jaw on the floor in the back. Like, this was not at all what I expected. So afterward, I talked to this Tyler guy for a little bit. He's hardcore. He's with the Defend the Guard movement. I don't know if you know about those guys, but it's this group of anti-war combat vets who are pushing state legislation to deny the Federal Reserve access to the reserves, so that they can't.
This is porn.
It's unbelievable. Now they're going around. They fail at a lot of these state house votes, but they're giving speeches. It's the most powerful thing ever, because it's not like hippies who are against the war. It's badass combat vets who are telling you exactly why you do not, short of a congressional declaration of war, you do not have the right to use the national reserves. You know what I mean, for your foreign affairs. So he's great. He's like this guy. And then I went up to her and I was like, hey, Senator, I got to say, I'm like blown away. Like a senator who's like understands monetary policy. Like, I felt like I was watching a unicorn out there. Like, I didn't think that existed. And she points over at Tyler and she goes, well, I got a good teacher. And I was like, wow.
So this senator has someone really great in her ear, and it's not just like he gave her some talking points and then she went out and said them.
He sat her down.
He sat her down. He got her interested enough that she started reading this stuff on her own and is now really talking about it. So that's like, I'm singing her praises coming out of that thing.
Okay. Yeah, so Reardon gave the context. Dave Smith is talking about Freedom Fest that just happened in South Dakota. And a Republican senator that I'd never heard of either, out of Wyoming, first-term senator, and is someone to look out for. And he really sang her praises right before I even started that clip. Said he thought she was better than any of the ones that are there now. And he was really shocked because, you know, it's Freedom Fest. You get a lot of quote-unquote liberty Republicans there, and you don't really expect too much. You know what? I'm really irritated that clip wasn't Mr. Kingpill. And I think before I go on to the next clip here with Michael Malice, and thank you, Jacob, for the super chat. And I'm gonna stick you up on screen here to interact with your comment. I'm gonna scroll through while I have you guys here to see if I can find that Kingpill clip, because I feel like such a jackass for introducing it and then it not being the next clip. And let me stick because I want to thank Jacob. Thank you so much. And the second most consistent motherfucker. Okay, well, let me see if I can find this Kingpill clip here a second. I got my microphone in the way if you're wondering why I'm like looking all to the side here. So just give me 1 second. What did I title that show? Like you guys would know, but Michael no, it's not. What did I call it? MM1, MM2? I think it's this clip here. Let me play this and see if this is it.
But to Matt's point, I agree with everything that you're saying. But to Matt's point, is this just going to be a boom and bust cycle like we see in economic activity, where we break it down and we get to the a kind of anarchist society, but then as those with wealth and power and influence begin to then impose their will, that we're going to have the state or government is going to emerge again, and we'll have to go
this
through
isn't
this
it, but this is also one I missed.
What Matt said is really kind of the crux of my big struggle with it.
Let me give you an example of why I don't think that's the case. Real life examples. We're all old enough men that we remember when we were kids. If you had something like the MASH finale, the Super Bowl, the Oscars, you could get a working majority of Americans, if not even just the TV viewing audience. I think literally a majority of Americans watch some of these events. It is now impossible, other than, let's suppose, George Bush's speech after 9/11, which was like a national, traumatic emergency situation, to get a majority of people to agree. When we were kids, there were like 5 or 6 record labels, and all the music you listened to on the radio was coming out of one of these record labels. Now, there's no barrier between the musician and the audience. So the idea that in a free society, things would consolidate into a government, if you look at every market that we're dealing with in our lifetimes, the trend has always been toward more choice, and it's always been toward more choice even within an individual company. I think we're all old enough to remember this happened in the 90s, when every terrible stand-up comedian, by which I mean Dave Smith, would go on stage and do jokes about like, oh, when I was a kid, you had Coke and Diet Coke, and now you've got caffeine-free cherry Diet Coke. Where does it end? And that dumb joke, which I'm sure Dave Smith uses all the time, makes a point, which is in every market, things are getting more and more options for the consumer, and they're not being consolidated to what they would love, which is just Coke versus Pepsi, and everyone has to drink soda by law.
Okay. All right. That wasn't the clip either. I apologize, guys. I think I didn't load it up. So next time I do the Liberty Boudoir, I'm going to have to include a lot of Matt, because I owe it to him, A, for like talking shit, and then not, God really taught me a lesson, didn't he? He was trying to teach me a lesson in humility for talking shit, then not having the clip. sorry, but this was a good clip as well. And thank you, Vertigo Event Productions, for the super chat. But crazy, I can't believe I did that. Yep, I talked shit. Should teach me not to talk shit. Okay, let me go to the next one where I think we're talking Freedom Fest. Yeah.
But to Matt's point, I agree.
No, that we already did that. Okay.
And to the point that even in the year 2000, right, which is following 8 years of Bill Clinton, if you listen to what George W. Bush campaigned on, what he campaigned on was a humble foreign policy. No nation building, no policing of the world. America is here to defend America. We need free markets here. We need deregulation. We need to cut spending and cut taxes. I mean, all of this stuff, right? And now you look at it and we're 20 years in to the 21st century.
Right.
And Republican presidents had 12 of those 20 years. And so if you can't look at it and just say objectively, by any of those standards of what those conservatives, the agenda that they wanted to put into action, none of it. And not only none of it, it's not like we didn't get that through. It went 8,000 miles in the opposite direction. And so it is interesting, and particularly coming off this Donald Trump thing where he was this huge middle finger to the establishment, and it's okay, now that failed too. So now what?
Okay, and what Dave Smith is saying is how even the Republicans now don't buy the Republican bullshit. Like, they don't buy, oh, if only we controlled all the branches or whatever, because it's happened and nothing happened. That this is a great opportunity for us as libertarians because the Republicans do not even drink the Republican Kool-Aid anymore. And that was, I believe, the context of that. It's at least the lesson I drew from it, but I'm pretty sure that was the context of that. Somehow my clips got all jumbled up. So we're just having clip jumble today. God's keeping me humble. That's exactly what's going on. I think it also had to do with me having a terrible migraine earlier today. I can tell you that, and Diana earlier thanked me for standing up for liberty. So I appreciate that, Diana. And I had something I actually wanted to add to that. I've had terrible insomnia all week because frickin' LNC is giving me a nervous breakdown with the way you guys don't see what's going on behind the scenes. It's not good. But I wanted to address something else. Those of you who are reading the LNC list, I got an alarmed email where people had, at least one person, and I can't tell whether they were a supporter or not a supporter. It wasn't a hostile email. It was a genuine question email that, was I now going against transparency because there's a discussion going on where I said I am not turning over all of my LNC emails to the investigatory committee. And somebody, I don't want to say accused me because it wasn't an accusatory email, but basically said, am I going against my principle of transparency? First of all, I've been on the LNC for 6 years now. This New Hampshire thing is the span of about 3 months. They don't need emails from 6 years ago, okay? They don't. But that isn't even it, because I don't even really care about that, to be honest with you. There are emails of which we have a policy where you can report harassment or other sensitive concerns. And in the past, I had reported a situation in which I felt my personal safety was in jeopardy. I do not want other people to see these sensitive emails. This has nothing to do with New Hampshire. But I reported this concern in confidence. And if the person I was reporting read these emails, I could be in danger. So hopefully you don't think then it's unreasonable that I don't want other people other than the chair, other than the people I reported these safety concerns to. That is all I don't want to give them. And I already talked to the New Hampshire guy about it. not New Hampshire, excuse me, the investigatory committee chair about it. And I told him I would turn those emails over to LNC counsel so that he could review them and make sure they had nothing to do with New Hampshire. But it is not unreasonable, if I am in fear for my safety, to not want to turn down where I turn over where I was reporting a current safety concern. This isn't a safety concern from 6 years ago either. It's current. This was like in February. Has nothing to do with New Hampshire because the New Hampshire issue became ripe at their convention, which was in March. But don't come at me saying I'm not anti-transparency or I'm trying to hide something. I have a legitimate right to where I, under the policy manual, under a strict policy of confidentiality, reported a safety concern. Anyone who's coming at me for that can go fuck themselves. Other than that, I don't care what they look at. Though I do think it is completely unreasonable for other LNC members to say you turn over your entire email box. It should at least be limited by date because things from last term have nothing to do with this one, even if they just limited it to this term. There are fiduciary duties I have to this party for contract negotiating and things like that. And yes, of course, the members of the investigatory committee are under an NDA. Just because you're under an NDA, the person revealing information is still supposed to take reasonable precautions that you don't let people see things, because this has nothing to do with disclosing. I'm just going to make up shit out of the air. But let's say there was a contract negotiation email that had nothing to do with New Hampshire. And then in the future, one of these members of the committee end up in some kind of contract negotiation with the LNC. They can't unsee a contract negotiation from the past and take advantage of it and get some kind of bargaining advantage from it. You can't unsee that. An NDA doesn't help that. So I, as an officer, do have a fiduciary duty to this party not to give to them things that have absolutely nothing to do with New Hampshire, because it can cause an advantage to people in the future. The NDA is just to protect us, A, from anything that is relevant that's confidential, or if we accidentally send something. I work in law. I know how discovery works. And people coming at me for that are just looking to try to discredit me. You know, it's just ridiculous. And if I have to get an attorney to help me with this, I will. But don't come at me. You know, my commitment to transparency is only beaten by Star Child's. You know, I've proven myself. I shouldn't have to prove myself every single damn day. But I certainly shouldn't have to turn over emails that have to do with an ongoing security concern that I have. That has absolutely nothing to do with what happened in New Hampshire. Nothing. Hold on, I'll go to the next scene once I can let go of my hair here. But in case anyone saw those emails, I wanted to explain what that was all about. But the LNC is now bullying me about that. And they know damn well, this is what's sick. A member who reads this and doesn't know that I'm talking about a security concern, okay, it's a very legitimate question going, what is it that I don't want to turn over? But the LNC knows damn well what I'm talking about, and at least one LNC member is still bullying me about it. You think that's right? I don't think that's right.
One of the things people in the audience don't appreciate, and this, I had this conversation with Michael Knowles because he's like, oh, you know, we don't have the numbers. I'm like 9 people made this approach to this country, regardless of what your opinion is about abortion. It was all you needed was those 9 people, and there's nothing you can really do about it, right? So what people don't understand is that any political system is always going to be the organized minority against the disorganized majority. This is the basis of rent seeking, which is, I hate that expression because it doesn't have to do with rent. But the idea is, okay, I'm an anchovy farmer, right? I want to have subsidies for anchovy farms. You and Lewis and everybody else do not have an opinion, so you're not going to fight. It'll be very easy for me to get that senator on the phone, be his lobbyist, and be like, all right, we need anchovy subsidies. Give me $1 million a year. he has to type in one sentence. No one's going to know.
Yeah.
I get my money, and you guys, between all of you, have to pay a penny each. But there's this asymmetry. So it's the same kind of thing. If you have enough people and everyone else just floating around, not knowing what's going on, or just following their nose, or looking for their keys where the light happens to be, that is how a lot of change gets affected.
That is so absolutely true. And I wish more people would understand this. We don't need a majority to affect change. It's funny, when I'm doing the People's Party opposition research, they understand this. They understand they don't need to get a majority if they're looking more at electoral victory. But like, they understand that if they got 2 or 3 people in the Senate or the House, they would wield tremendous influence, because they would end up being swing votes. They would end up, people would have to be coming to them hats in hand to try to get the votes. You do not need a majority. Haven't we figured this out when the Republicans or the Democrats, but lately it's been the Republicans more often, get all butthurt when we beat the spread in an election? They say we spoiled it. We have tremendous influence there when we can beat the spread. But to his point, a motivated minority is always the world changers. Always. Most people are too busy just trying to make ends meet. A motivated minority changes the world. And that's a point both Dave and Michael make often, and it is so, so true.
And this is a big complaint about Washington, that they have these huge bills that no one reads. It's literally impossible to read them. And so it could be worked in a nefarious way, but it could also work in a positive way. When you pass a bill like, oh, let's just make it so you are allowed to use Bitcoin at this store, by law. Oh, okay, well, I don't know what the hell that is, but what do I care?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you have all this kind of cataclysmic change.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it's not, you can, and it's not like it's a false choice to say it's not a matter of like that we don't need more people, but the idea that we need 51% is completely ridiculous. By the way, 51% isn't even what it takes to win an election, because like half the country doesn't even vote in the elections. You're already down to like 25% to win an election. But if you had 10 million really competent, passionate, intelligent people who believed in freedom, in positions of influence, who are like, or just influential people in their communities and stuff, this would be a drastically different country. Like drastically different.
And so that kind of model, like, people need to appreciate more, just how few people it takes in the right places to affect change. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt got elected by one person.
Yeah, is that right?
So, well, Leon Salgas, he shot McKinley.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah.
And then now he's the president. So there's just lots of examples that are not as nefarious as that. Where
I love how Dave goes, "Oh yeah, go on." It's like he thought there was some kind of weird history you didn't know. Oh, and Diana, if you're going to be in Reno, we will definitely meet, and I will collect that hug. And thank you so much, Matt. Matt had said, I'm here and I support CAH and all the ugly hard work she does. I appreciate it. Anyone else, I don't know if ladies or guys, when you curl your hair and you get that like heat spike, and it just makes my head itch whenever I get that too much heat. Heat makes me itch. I don't know why. Okay, I'm going to be combing this out. I know it's all crazy looking. I'm going to spray it, let it cool down, and comb it out. But I think we need to take heart by the fact that a motivated minority changes the world.
And as you pointed out, I always loved this tweet that you had. This is from years ago. You said something to the effect of, I wonder how, what percentage of the American people realize that the NRA is the moderate wing of the
I was
guns
on
rights.
Kennedy, and I said the NRA. I said, like, they're regarded as, if I'm not mistaken, they're regarded as kind of like the sellouts.
Yes.
And the panel and Kennedy laughed at me. And I went on Twitter and I go, am I wrong? And the gun people are like, no, we hate the NRA. They're the complete sellouts. And Cody Wilson, who was the guy behind 3D printing guns, said the NRA fought us because, and it makes sense strategically, because their concern was that the Second Amendment would be adjudicated to not be an individual right, then you're really screwed. But the point is, they were not at all like, rah, 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 this is our workaround. And they've been responsible, or at least haven't fought many of these gun restrictions.
No, the president of the NRA got on stage at CPAC earlier this year and said, if you want to solve gun crime in America, there's only one thing you need to do,
No,
and
no,
that
no,
is
no, 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 no.
enforce existing
No, he
gun
didn't say
laws.
that. He said
Swear
that.
to God, go check it out. Said enforce.
I loved Michael Malice. No, 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 no. Yep. My husband is big Second Amendment guy. You know, I'm a pacifist, so I don't know half of this shit. But yeah, he likes gun owners of America. The NRA is they'll sell your rights down the river. You know, I'm glad at least they partially believe in gun rights, but they're not the champions of gun rights by any stretch of the imagination. And half the time they won't endorse a libertarian candidate that's much better on gun rights than some gun grabber Republican. Something else I wanted to, there was a comment earlier that the Free State Project should have chosen Wyoming instead of New Hampshire. I think they were looking at Wyoming. But speaking of Free State and libertarians moving and changing someplace, next week my interview on unsafe spaces is going to be out, where I talk about the island of Niue that we can take over. So when that's out, I'll shoot you guys the link. I think you might be really, really interested in it. And maybe we'll all move out to the coast of New Zealand.
So his big pitch is you don't need to add more gun control. You just need to enforce the laws that are already on the books. So that is, now I'll tell you, there's a whole bunch of people in the gun rights community whose position is abolish all gun laws, which is not at all the same position as enforce all gun laws.
That's the Libertarian Party position. Abolish all gun laws. There's no excuse for any gun laws. None. None, 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 none.
There was this great meme of like a list of Democratic principles, you know, like open borders and like trans kids and not those Democratic policies, but like typical like laundry list of ostensible leftist positions. And then the right, you had this boomer wearing a MAGA cap saying, "I want all that, but legally." It's like, yeah, okay, buddy.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I know that to me was funny. The MAGA people always got me crazy. I'm not against immigration. I'm just against illegal immigration. So, in other words, you care more about form over function. You don't really care about it. You just want people to jump through the hoops you want them to jump through. Get out of here.
But so I don't exactly understand, why some of these guys, I think in reason, those types would be playing this game. I mean, I know that like Brian Doherty, who I like a lot. He's a really great writer, and he's really written some great stuff.
Do you know how he signed my book, Radicals for Capitalism, per my request?
How?
To my, I'm not going to say the word, but to my N-word, Michael Malice.
Really?
Yes, GGA. It's in there.
That's okay. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But like there is a thing, like he wrote an article recently about the kind of like civil war in the LP and like the whole kind of like takeover of the Libertarian Party. And there is just a thing, and I'm cool with like the Reason guys. And I think I'm going back on Nick Gillespie's interview thing this week.
You have to ask him why they pretended the Anarchist Handbook didn't exist.
Okay. Absolutely. I absolutely will.
Challenge them because they're talking.
Absolutely. Because it's not like, by the way, it was the #1 book. It's not like as if there's like, oh, there was a book that I think is important that you ignored. It's like, it was the book. There's no denying it at this point. Like, but I will say to Brian, like the thing that just kind of like, to me, I'm like, I'm so like accessible to you guys. And we run in so many of the same circles, and all of you guys know who I am. And you're writing a story about the insurgency in the Libertarian Party. Like, dude, shoot me a message.
Wait, they didn't call you?
No. Didn't ask for comment.
You're joking.
Didn't ask for anything. And I'm just kind of like, look, man, like obviously.
Wait, you're kidding. You have to be kidding.
No, nothing. Didn't reach out to me at all. Nothing. No comment from me. And I'm like, look, I'm not having like some big head here. Like,
look, I got to interrupt you. I'm sorry. No, stop.
Okay. I'm going to disagree with both David Smith and Michael Malice here, and I'm going to laugh. This is the article that came out right after my whistleblowing. I'm the one who alerted Reason to this. I contacted Reason and gave them the story. That's why Reason didn't think they needed to talk to Dave Smith. They had the whistleblower on the LNC. So sorry, Dave, you are being a little... They had the source they needed. Maybe you didn't realize that, but I'm the one who called them about the story. But what's funny here is Michael, and I adore him, is being a little hypocritical here. Because Michael Malice has spoken multiple times about what's going on the LNC. And in fact, he just did so a little bit recently. I think I'm going to have the clip. I think it's coming up. He's going to have the clip about it where he gets things a little wrong. So Michael's taking Dougherty to task for not going to the original sources. Meanwhile, I've written Michael and said, if you want to talk about what's going on in the LNC, here's your original source. And he's never followed up on me with that. So why are you getting on Brian Dougherty's case? Now, I love both these guys, but they're wrong here. Dave wasn't going to add any additional information. The story was not really about the Mises Caucus. It was about the corruption on the LNC. And I know more about that than Dave does. And I love him. Please hear me. I'm not trying to be critical. And Michael, don't bitch about people not going to primary sources when you've had the whistleblower on the LNC offer to talk to you and you don't even respond to the private message. Now, I'm not butthurt or anything. I would be like, he's probably best that he doesn't answer me because I probably would fangirl so bad. It's just not even funny. But the fact is, glass houses here, guys. Glass houses. Or at least Michael.
Because I have to interrupt you, because people don't appreciate how this works. How it works with journalism is, let's suppose I'm the New York Times and I want to do a hit piece on Dave Smith, right? I write up my article, I email you at 4:00, and I say, I've got a deadline at 5. What is your answer to this laundry list? Dave Smith could not be reached for comment, right? They all do that to cover their ass, because if you're writing about someone, it is journalism 101 that you make some pretense. It's not often completely insincere of reaching out to the party involved.
But I would not expect Brian to make a false pretense like that. I don't think he's that
Brian's
type of
a decent dude.
Yeah, he's a decent guy, and he's a good and he's a very good and I think honest writer. But I'm just saying, like, it's not like me being like gassed up about my own role, but like if the article is if the article is about the insurgency, this movement taking over the Libertarian Party, then I'm sorry, there's one guy to go get comment from on that, and it's me. Like, I'm the guy to go talk to about that movement. And so I was just kind of like these things where I'm like, well, why not at least, if you're going to write this piece, like, make it a better piece?
See, I thought it was a very good piece, actually, and I'm going to disagree with Dave here. Again, no offense, Dave. But I think the one guy actually to talk to would be Michael Heiss. He's been at this. He's the guy who ultimately started all that. But I don't think the story was about the insurgency. I think the story was about the LNC corruption. But Dave's point is fair. The article could have been better if they talked to Dave or Michael. But perhaps I'm prejudiced by the fact that I was working with Brian on this. This article was supposed to be out 5 or 6 days before it was, and it kept snowballing, and they kept talking to more people and more people. There's always more people you could talk to. So I think Dave's got a decent point. But Michael Malice doesn't have a leg to stand on to be criticizing Dougherty here, since Michael's not even made the slightest attempt to talk to somebody on the LNC, and I offered to talk to him. And me or Joshua Smith would easily talk to him. We're both accessible to him. So, sorry, Michael, you're off base here. You're adorable. You're adorably off base.
I have news about the LP, which will interest very few people, but will interest you. So all the Libertarian Party business is public. There's a Google Groups that is publicly available.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're someone who happens to spend a lot of time at home with nothing to do, and you know what they say about idle little hands, well, there was drama because, to refresh people's memory, because this is so inside baseball and boring, there was basically the woman, Gilletta Jarvis, who basically declared herself to be, I am the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. She kicked out everybody else unilaterally, passed a series of bylaws unilaterally, including a loyalty oath. And then people are like, you can't this isn't just like breaking Libertarian Party policy. You're breaking the law because you're holding on to assets that don't belong to an individual but to the party.
Yep.
And there was some drama with the head. Is it Joe Bishop Henchman is his name? Joe. Where there was drama because basically he backed her up, but people were like, wait. Then he's saying there was a third party involved. Who is it? And he resigned. Well, I don't know if you know this.
Oh, I don't.
They went into his emails and they got all the emails where he was discussing about this, and they're doing an investigation. I'm not accusing him of anything, but they did this. I think they filmed it to show that they're not just hacking,
Right.
reading personal stuff. And then they got out of it and they logged out. But what happened, the backstory with that New Hampshire thing is currently an ongoing investigation, and they have the receipts. And I would point out, even though he's blocked me on Twitter correctly, there's no mention of the Libertarian Party in his Twitter biography, which you would think if you were proud to have been a chairman,
Mhm.
even if you left under, like I hate what the party has become,
Yeah.
you still could have been like, I was chair of the LP when it was something to be proud of. It's quite a resume accomplishment
think
to be
so?
head of a party if the party matters that much. So that's where we are with that, and I am very, very interested to see what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I would be very interested to see that.
Okay. Now, this just makes me laugh in light of what they said before. Let me put Jacob's comment on the screen here. I lost my mouse. I need to get that mouse shaker add-on. So Jacob said, sure, but someone, Heist or somebody. You're not part of the caucus, so you should have been interviewed for your role in the LNC, but someone from the caucus should have been interviewed. I think that's a fair point, but in Dougherty's defense, I don't think the article was about the caucus. But I'm not going to pretend that's not a fair point. But to get to what Michael had said, considering what he just said, and on his program, he's talking about what's going on in the LNC, and he has someone from the LNC who's willing to talk to him, yet he didn't talk to them. And I have offered. I didn't offer before this, though. But he knows I would talk to him because I said so on Twitter, but I've since PM'd him. What he said here is not correct. Or at least the inference he gave isn't correct. Though, in listening to it again, I do think he said something outright incorrect. Yes, JBH's emails have been reviewed. But Michael said, and he said the emails where he was talking about this with Jarvis was reviewed. That's not true, Michael. It might be true, but you don't know that. I don't know that. We don't know what's in his emails. It's been reviewed by the committee, but we don't know. Do you want my opinion? I don't think he talked about this with Jarvis on his LP email. That would be incredibly stupid. I don't think his emails are going to show a damn thing. So be cautious, because you went on your show and said that we've looked at the emails where he was talking about this. All you can say for certain is all I can say for certain. His emails have been reviewed. That's it. We don't know if they show anything. And I would... JBH is an attorney. He's smarter than that. Well, I thought he was smarter than this whole thing. But the plan, I disagreed with Dave on this before, where Dave said the plan was stupid. I actually think the plan was brilliant. So I don't think we're going to find anything in his emails. I don't think we're going to find anything in anybody's emails. This isn't a legal investigation, so we have no right to ask for anyone's private emails. And I don't think any of it was even in his private emails. Michael would know this if he was, again, talk with someone from the LNC. JBH wasn't the primary architect behind this. It was a third person from out of state. JBH's involvement was bad, but he wasn't the mastermind, and I bet you it was all took place over the phone. JBH is a phone type of guy. I do not think we are going to find anything in the emails. He'd be incredibly stupid if he did. So, Michael was wrong there, and I'd be more than willing to tell Michael whatever it is he wants to know. He could just talk to me, and I would let him know. You could talk to me privately and then co-report it on a show. It's not like I'm whoring to get on a show or anything, though I obviously would be thrilled to be on a show. That's not my goal here. My goal here is to just get him accurate information. He doesn't, he could just talk to me over Twitter DM, and that's fine. He doesn't have to do any of it, quite obviously, but I mean, I'm not trying to angle for a place on his show. What happened to Jarvis? Did she leave the LP? No. And I doubt she'll be leaving the LP. Let me finish putting on my lip liner here for a second, because it's bothering me that only half my lips are lined. Okay, and we'll put on the lipstick in a minute, but I at least wanted to get my whole lips aligned. So I just thought that was interesting. Jacob, I would be more than glad to elaborate on why I think it's brilliant. I have said this multiple times before, but I know not everyone can listen to the hours and hours and hours of stuff. The reason the plan was brilliant is it relied upon the institutional inertia of the party. And we already saw that happening. The only reason the plan failed is because they didn't count on me having extra time Saturday night, within hours of finding out what happened, interviewing them on film. Nobody could have anticipated I would have done that, or anyone would have done that. If I hadn't done that, which is why I'd been attacked so viciously by the LNC and by all the right people for doing that, claiming their claims are ridiculous. Anybody will tell you talking to witnesses close in time to the events is the best possible thing you can do. If I didn't do that, the outrage would have lasted a couple days. All JBH would have needed to do was stonewall for a week at most before the institutional inertia would have kicked in and everyone would have just thrown up their hands and said, let New Hampshire handle it. You already saw that happening. And possession is 9/10 of the law. Jarvis was in possession of the party at that point and its database. The LNC would have thrown up its hands. I would have screamed and yelled, but I would have had no proof. And she would have walked away with the party. It was a brilliant plan. And it would have worked. If it wasn't for those meddling kids, I would have gotten away with it. Okay.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that corporate media does is it teaches a lot of people that they're the good guy, and the good guy by definition can't do bad things, and they never have to worry about, well, what if the bad guy's stronger than you? Like that happens a lot. Like you're like a big dude just beats the crap out of you, but he's clearly the bad guy, but he still wins. But also, if you're so sure you're the good guy, sometimes you allow yourself to do things that are pretty bad. But since you're so sure you're the hero of the story, because I hate racists, therefore nothing I do is wrong. Like a lot of people will be like, yeah, I'm glad you hate racists. I think that's the correct position, but you're still doing some really shady stuff. And as an attorney, you should know a bit better. So I don't know what's going to happen there, but I really like it when people are in a retreat.
And there, Michael is exactly right. They were justifying this as they're fighting Nazis. And you'll do almost anything to fight Nazis, won't you? So, yeah. And I was wondering what you guys thought. The reason I put on the red lipstick, because this hairstyle, once I had it done, reminded me so much of like World War II era. Isn't it kind of vintagey, where they all wore that bright lipstick and hardly any other makeup? So what do you think? I think I really got like the vintage girl look going on now. So that's why I threw on the red. And this is vintage lipstick too. This is from Be Same. This is Victory Red. Anyway, so I was wondering what y'all thought. But yeah, he's definitely right there. Now I'm going to ask y'all's opinion. I've got a bunch more clips, but we've been at this for a while. If you're interested, I'll keep going. If not, we can do part 2 another day. So if you guys let me know what you think. I'm getting a little tired, but because I've had terrible insomnia, as I said. Yeah, retro futuristic because it's dyed pink. If it was bright red, or a nice brunette, it would totally look whatchamacallit, authentically retro. Um, okay, so Diana wants me. So we'll keep going. We got a bunch of different stuff, and it's wildly different topics. But so we'll continue. And again, not. I always say this, and I get so incredibly awkward in saying this, but this is my job right now. If you're enjoying it and you're able to, super chats are appreciated, but otherwise, do not worry about it. But I have to do the self promo because this is my job right now. This is my life right now. So we're going to continue, but let me let you know what's coming up. I've got some Ben Shapiro, where he's ranting about trans stuff, and I just think he's so off base. Not necessarily even in his ideological issues on the trans stuff. Just his arguments are dumb. He's just making dumb arguments. I have something coming up which I'm trying to give fair warning that some people might find offensive because it's a fitness guy interacting with like a fat acceptance activist. I don't get into those issues. I don't really care what people do with their bodies at all. But the point he was making is ultimately good, but I like warning that this is coming up. And Diana asked if I make money off ad revenue. I do, but very little. Political content does not make ad money on YouTube. I like disclose everything. You know how I am. I think last month, was it my last YouTube paycheck, nearly everything I made was off of super chats. I think ad revenue was like $30. Like it wasn't a lot, you know, might even have been less. I'd have to look, but political content does not make much in ad revenue. I mean, I'll take it. Listen, an extra dollar is an extra dollar, you know, I won't sniff at it, but the content that on YouTube that makes a lot in ad revenue is like the family channels or the toy review channels and stuff like that. So, and if you guys want me to start including different people other than Dave, Michael, Ben, that's who I tend to listen to. I'm going to start listening to that King Pilled guy. I'll take recommendations for other contents. I think I'm going to start listening to Jimmy Snow again. He just irritated me for a while, and start critiquing his content again. But let's continue.
I have
here we go.
1, 2, I have 3 fucking inhalers! 3! And I also have to carry this fucking iron lung with me anywhere I goddamn go! Just in case if these don't work and you have the nerve to tell me that you have a doctor's note not to wear this! If any doctor gave you that, it's because you're that fucking weak you can't wear a piece of cloth! You're a fucking selfish bitch! And if your husband does that too in public, I hope you both catch COVID!
But I'd also like to point out the massive amount of privilege. This woman calling other people too weak to wear a mask when she is too weak to be in the environment without other people trying to do something to protect her health. That's the reality. That's the craziness of it all.
Okay. Woof! And thank you, Jacob. I appreciate it. You always are so generous. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. That lady. But he's right. Isn't this a weird society we live in where, listen, if you choose out of the goodness of your own heart to go out of your way to do things to protect other people, I think that's noble. And as a Christian, I think that is something you should do. But you have no obligation to do that. And you are not selfish if you don't. You are an entitled, whiny person if you think you can have a claim on someone else's life rather than being grateful. But he's going to go on now to say some things again, which might be a little offensive because it has to do with her appearance. Just fair warning. Let's go.
is that this woman is so weak, she demands other people try to take care of her and then calls them weak or says that there's something wrong with them when they won't involuntarily help her because of conditions she has that are hers to bear or situations and lifestyle choices she has bared upon herself by making herself more obese, exacerbating her conditions. This is the reality, people. Like, no kidding. If you are young and healthy and you supplement vitamin D and zinc and everything like that, you should want, and this is going to be super controversial, but you should want your natural immune system exposed to everything in the environment it possibly can be to help keep a robust immune system along with the proper food, weight, exercise, vitamin supplementation for vitamin D and other things that we don't get enough of naturally due to our inherent lifestyle. If you do not want, as a young, healthy person, your immune system exposed to the environment so it can continue to get stronger and do what you want it to do, coupled with a healthy lifestyle, you should actually check yourself.
And he's correct, though I have to say, just my compassion makes it, I don't like pointing out people's weight. For me, that just makes me uncomfortable, but he's right. She's at risk and has to wear all that shit, at least in part, because unless she has some kind of health condition, which very few people are involuntarily obese, she put that on herself. And now she's blaming other people and freaking the hell out. Lady, lose 200 pounds. Oh, I don't know. I'm not good at estimating weight. But that ain't other people's responsibility. You know? And yes, I also love Mountain Dew. And there was somebody earlier who said something that I wanted to bring up on screen, if that's okay, because I absolutely agree. So Banjo Playing Bison said, I'm autistic and I can't personally stand wearing a mask anymore. I'm autistic as well, if you don't know. I don't know if I've seen you in my chat before, but I too am autistic. And I have extreme sensory issues, like a lot of us do. And I can't take it either. Neurotypicals don't understand the severe sensory issues that autistic people can have. And it depends on the day. Some days it doesn't bother me, to be honest with you. And other days it drives me mad, you know? So, yeah. So, sorry, lady. You don't have a claim on my life, and maybe put down the cheeseburger. Just saying.
We were talking about this yesterday. I went to a skate park over the weekend, and skate park's notorious for kids being punk rock, fighting with security guards, vandalizing property. And you know what the graffiti was at the skate park? Black Lives Matter. Trans rights are human rights. That was the graffiti. And I started laughing. I'm like, that's like an Amazon.com, like big bold thing when you go on. It's an organization. It is mainstream pop culture. The embassies fly the flag, and little kids think they're being rebels by adopting a message that is used by U.S. embassies and Walmart.com.
Right.
That is youth indoctrination.
Okay, he was interviewing Candace Owens there, and I can't stand Candace Owens. Sorry if you like her, I can't stand her. But that is so funny. That's the only Tim Pool clip I have. But I am starting to watch Tim Pool. You guys recommended it, so you'll start seeing more Tim Pool clips. But he's right. It's not edgy to do Black Lives Matter right now. You could go buy Black Lives Matter crap at Walmart. The minute the corporate is bought onto it, you're not a rebel, dude. If you're a kid in a skate park, come on. Find some real rebellion, why don't you? And why do I play a lot of Ben Shapiro clips? I try to find at least popular people that are somewhat respected within their genres. I obviously do not agree with Ben Shapiro on a ton of things, but he does make some good points, and I think we're not being fair if we don't recognize that. But if you want to see something really annoying, check out his sister. I need to start doing some more critiques on his sister. Oh, she is something. I have some old ones on my channel. Her name's Classically Abby. Oh my goodness, she is annoying. And pretentious as hell. Way more pretentious than Mr. King Pill, by the way. I need to do some more Classically Abby videos just for fun, just for shits and grins.
how much of this is, you know, big government and big business ultimately are, you know, I think a lot of libertarians like to see them as diametrically opposed, you know,
Right.
irresistible force, immovable object. And no, these, you know, they're kind of like twin sons.
Yeah, well, this is what Rand got completely wrong and Rothbard got completely right, is that this is the crony relationship between these big companies and the government is to both of their benefits. And yeah, of course, I mean, why would Facebook be asking for regulation when they can regulate their own company however they want to? It's because they want that regulation also enforced on would-be competitors. And this is nothing new. I mean, Walmart was pushing for minimum wage laws forever.
Right. After a long time, they
Yeah.
pushed against it, and then they were like, "Hey, you know what? We can suck it up, and we can put a lot of people out of business."
Yeah, they realized it'll actually help them. And this is, I mean, this is true across. If you look at like, it's probably 90% of regulation is lobbied in by the big businesses in that industry because it benefits big business to have much higher hurdles to jump over for upstarts.
Okay, and yeah, you guys notice it's Dave again. I love Dave. So if I critique him every once in a while, y'all know, like, I love Dave. But this is Dave where before he talked that he might be talking with Reason Magazine, Nick Ulepsy. That's what this is. And the topic was his potential presidential run and his critique of libertarians going, but it's a private company type thing. And he's making the points here that big business is in bed with big government. They're not sheerly private businesses. Now, I also make the point, which I don't know if Dave agrees with. It's more of a left libertarian point, is I don't believe corporations are legitimately libertarian to begin with. They're not people, and I don't have the compunctions against punishing corporations that I do against regular people.
If we have a debate where people are, you know, or a convention where people are stripping and having debates about driver's licenses and stuff like that, then we'll be viewed as the joke.
Okay, I disagree with him. This is where, listen, who was it that said I'm the second most consistent motherfucker? I'm vying for number one. You want to know why? Because I'm more radical than Dave is, I think. Maybe him and I need to have a measuring contest. Because here, I disagree with him. Not with the stripping thing. That was just totally stupid. But to poo-poo arguing about driver's licenses are a big freaking deal. They are a huge government intrusion. And you shouldn't mock saying that should be a topic at a libertarian convention. It's a classic show me your papers, Fraulein. You need a license in order to freely move around using modern conveniences? Hell no. Hell no. Hell no. And I'm disappointed that he made that like it was a silly, kooky issue. Can you imagine if we didn't have driver's licenses today and then they got instituted tomorrow? What a big civil rights violation they would be viewed as? Why are we viewing them as any less just because we're used to it? The kids growing up today are going to be used to lockdowns. Does that mean it's okay once because they're used to it? And I know the legal status of corporations. I'm a corporate law paralegal. Doesn't mean they're people. They're not. I did a whole show on that, by the way.
And that's the state we're currently in.
So let me follow up on that. At one point, you talked about how no revolution, and you were talking, you know, partly the Ron Paul revolution, which of course was in the Republican primary. He did not do particularly well as a Libertarian Party candidate. In 1988, he got 431,000 votes, or half of a percentage point. But you said no revolution will succeed unless it's based around love. Can you kind of expand on that?
Well, I think that you have to that libertarians particularly, but just in general, that you have to let people know that we are not, you know, what the knock on libertarians, right, is like this kind of, oh, you care about profits more than you care about people, or that you just want to not pay taxes.
Right, or it's the Rand thing. You're
Yes.
the virtue of selfishness.
Which, you know, Rand wrote some really great stuff, but I think she did not do us any favors in that department in kind of playing into that stereotype. And that's just not really, at least from my perspective, what drives me to be a libertarian. I mean, I'm a libertarian because I care about and see how states destroy human lives, slaughtering people, imprisoning people, financially ruining people, destroy families, destroy prosperity. And so it is our love for, other people and our humanitarianism that drives us to be libertarians. So that's kind of what I meant about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very attractive, and a good way to put it. But it also seems that the Mises Caucus, in general, is constantly harping on people for being squishes, for being sellouts, for being cosmetarians, beltway libertarians, regime libertarians, things like that. And I two questions about that, because you also have said that what was great about Ron Paul is that he would coalition with anybody. I mean, he worked with people like Dennis Kucinich and Bernie Sanders and whatnot. So, can libertarians get along? And you've pretty eloquently in a couple of speeches I've seen you give, talk about how we have to stop hating on each other first and foremost. But that's like what a lot it seems to be coming out of the Mises caucuses at the state level. And I guess, how do you address that? And then the second question is, is having a ideologically purified candidate, which seems to be the goal of the Mises Caucus, how does that play out in presidential elections? Because when you have cited people like Ron Paul and Harry Brown, these are people who never got more than half of 1 percentage point in a presidential race, whereas, such people as Gary Bake the Cake Johnson, got up to 3.3% of the popular vote. And Joe Jorgensen, we must be, whatever it was, affirmatively anti-racist, got 1.2%. You got the second best, showing in the popular vote. So I guess my question is, how do you get the Mises Caucus to love,
Okay, I'm going to stop here because this is an extra long clip and so many issues just flew by and we got a couple on chat. Thank you, Jacob. I thought you were calling me second, so now I'm thrilled. I think I'm going to get that t-shirt, and next time I see Dave, I'm going to be like, no, bitch. No, bitch. Wow, a lot to unpack here. I think Nick Gillespie is missing the point. Missing the point of the Mises Caucus. And I also think he's missing a nuance in what Dave said. Why does it seem... Okay, Dave's point was that we need to have an empathetic message of love or motivated by love. But what Dave was talking about, as far as I understand, is in our messaging to non-libertarians. He wasn't saying we shouldn't love each other as well, but he was talking about how we need to message to people who do not yet buy the message of liberty. Nick spun that to, yeah, but Mises Caucus people are mean against other libertarians who they perceive as sellouts. Two totally different issues. It's far more damaging to liberty to have somebody who claims the name of liberty selling out than to have somebody who doesn't claim the mantle of liberty holding the exact same position. So Nick Gillespie completely missed the point. Yes, anybody, myself as well, you're going to be more critical of those, ooh, and I got some lipstick on my face, of those within than those without. I think Nick's a little upset because Reason gets called Beltway libertarians quite a bit. So I think they were talking about two totally different things. And I do agree with Dave that we need to have empathetic messaging to those who do not yet claim the mantle of liberty. But I do not think that means you're unloving if you're internally critical of those you think are selling our message out internally. Now, here's where I will disagree. And perhaps this is going to be a shocker. I know everyone keeps calling Dave the Nazi and he's so mean and all this. I'm going to disagree with him on motivations. But it should be no surprise to you guys because I have told you I'm as hard of a deontologist as they come. I mean, I firmly, and I think my actions have proven this over this year. I'm a firm believer in though the heavens may fall, do what is right. Okay? I'm unbending. I am not motivated by some kind of overarching love for humanity. I do have a love for humanity, and I am empathetic, and I think it's important to be, but that's not my motivation. And Dave claimed it was his, and that's fine if it's his. That's not mine. Mine is sheer cold ethics. Now, it's fortunate that I believe I'm going to go back to something that's a key point of the Radical Caucus. And the Radical Caucus has one of their key points that gets people all butthurt till they understand what they mean by it, is that natural rights are utilitarian. That is the one of their points. And people freak out because they hear the U word, because we're not utilitarians. But basically what the Radical Caucus is saying is that there is no conflict between believing in deontological natural rights and believing in liberty being good, generally speaking, for people. The two are not in conflict. But when you're coming down to first principles and your motivation, my motivation is not this is what's best for people. My motivation is this is what is right. And it also happens to be best for people. But my ultimate motivation is no, this is the right thing. Now, if it turned out doing the right thing made more people miserable, I might not be so eager to promote it, but I would still believe it. Because I am, at my core, a hard deontologist. And that's the type of person, actually, you want looking after you for your rights on the LNC. A hard deontologist. I can be a pain in the ass, and I can be difficult to get along with because of that, but you know I will never sell your rights down the river. Ever. I'd hurt myself first. Like, I do not do things that benefit me. I can't look at myself in the mirror that way because it's the hard deontologist. So that covered, I think, all of those points. But I want to deal with some of these driver's license points that were in the chat. One second here. H. Reardon said, there might still be driver's licenses the state did not issue them. The context of mine was state mandated. I have no problem if auto insurance companies required some kind of certification of competency before they would issue you insurance. My context is always state mandated. I do not have a problem with an auto insurance company deciding they do not want to insure you or charging you more. The same thing goes here with the commercial thing. I would want pilots that have demonstrated competency, but I think that is up to the airline, not the state. So I do not think they should be state licensed. I do think the companies that hire them should have competency standards. We will all point out, like underwriting laboratories is a certification for the safety of electrical items. It's not state mandated. It's a private certification company. I'm a certified paralegal, which means employer knows that I know what I'm doing. That certification is not issued by the state. It's by the National Association of Legal Assistants, which is a voluntary organization. Okay. Yeah, Jacob, Nick was trying to take a shot at the Mises Caucus, I think. And I think it was somewhat self-defensively, again, because I don't really think Reason is Beltway libertarians, by the way. I love Reason magazine. But I know some libertarians do and call them treason instead of reason. I'm aware of that. So I understand he's probably a little self-defensive. Yeah, Josh quoted Proverbs 18:24. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. I would also add, faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the enemies of but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. And as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Okay. See, I like Reason. See, there's my heresy. Now you guys know. Which is why I contacted Brian Dougherty for that article. I'm close with the guys at Reason. Just, I don't know. I like them. They've been very influential on me in my libertarian journey. Oh, wrong thing. I wanted to continue.
That's the
Let me find where I left off. Hold on.
Let me follow up on that. At one point, you talked about how no revolution.
Right here.
Ron Paul's position, and I don't think anyone really cares about. If we're ever getting to the point where we're having that conversation, me and you will both be very happy people. So I don't think we need to stress about.
I walk in the street anyway. So
yeah, there you go. So that's either that when you walk in the street, it's either that you're scared of someone else or you're scaring someone else.
Right.
There's no in between.
That's right. Yes.
So, I would say this, and I feel this way because we've talked about this before, and you were there when I debated Nick Sarwark, but I think it's very misleading to, or you're not going to get an accurate picture if you look at things the way you did when you laid out Ron Paul's vote totals in 88, or Harry Brown's vote totals in the year 2000, or Gary Johnson's vote totals in the year 2016. Number one, because what obviously changed there, right, was the Ron Paul campaigns of 2008 and 2012 from within the Republican Party. And as you know as well as I do, I mean, if you talk to any group of young libertarians, the overwhelming majority of them were brought in by the Ron Paul campaigns. This introduced libertarianism to more people than any other libertarian endeavor in my lifetime. And so, of course, Gary Johnson inherited the benefit of that. And so did Jo Jorgensen. I mean, Ron Paul mainstreamed the term libertarian, and then the people in the Libertarian Party did better. There were also other factors like, Trump and Hillary Clinton being the most intensely unlikable human beings who have ever sought that office, actually measurably so. Even polling data suggested this. And that's very different than, say, Ron Paul running in 1988 from a third party that didn't have ballot access at all 50 states, that didn't have the internet where you could reach a lot of people that way.
Harry Brown did, though.
Well, even Harry Brown,
and with two unpopular candidates, right? George W. Bush and Al Gore.
Not nearly as unpopular. Hold on, but let me just respond to that. Not nearly as unpopular. And
I'm not so sure we didn't have 50 state ballot access with Ron Paul. When I interviewed Steve Dosbeck the other night, he said what year we first got 50 state ballot access. So I could be wrong there, but I'm not sure about that. But other than that, his points are very well taken.
Not the internet of today at all. And also, George W. Bush was at the time running on so many of the good things. This is coming off the Republican Revolution in the House. He's running on a non-interventionist foreign policy, cutting spending, cutting regulation, cutting taxes. It was just a different time.
Why wouldn't we pursue, and by we, I mean libertarians, small L libertarians, why wouldn't we pursue the Republican Party then, which is where Ron Paul really made all of his, where he spent, that's the field he toiled in.
Well, so to answer that question, I just have to finish on the first part, which is that I also think we're in a flawed game if we're measuring by vote totals in a presidential election. Like, I would not, if Jo Jorgensen, I mean, they didn't, but if Jo Jorgensen and Spike Cohen had led to a huge movement of libertarians, like, say, Ron Paul style, right? They get around that many votes, but there's this huge, level of interest and excitement in the movement. I would consider that far more successful than Gary Johnson's campaign, even if it got more votes. I mean, because both of them, it's not like either of them won, so more votes doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, it helps with...
Right. As I said, my friend Mark Montoni has the article, Why Hold Back If You're Not Going to Win? If you're not going to win the election, you have to have another goal, and this is the goal. This is the way, as the kids like to say.
Ballot access and other things. But that aside, to me, the reason to pursue the Libertarian Party, I mean, if there was a Ron Paul type figure who was going to had a real shot at being the nominee of the Republican Party, then
like
perhaps
Rand Paul, perhaps.
Right. Yes, and I was excited about Rand Paul in 2016, but we all know how that went, and we all saw what happened to the party after Trump kind of took it over. And the truth is that right now you're looking at a situation where it's either going to be Donald Trump again, the man who is responsible for continuing Obama's genocide in Yemen, or it's going to be DeSantis, Israel's best friend, who basically thinks Donald Trump was right about everything as the presidential nominee. And there just is no Ron Paul there. Whereas in the Libertarian Party, we do have a chance to really get a great libertarian, somebody who can actually, excite people, introduce these ideas to people, get on big platforms. We don't need the corporate press nearly as much as we used to. We don't need the debate stages as much. There are alternative platforms that are actually not the alternative platform anymore.
And then he goes on to point out like how Joe Rogan has a bigger reach than the lamestream media. So I wish I didn't clip it right before then. I realized now that I did. I think Dave Smith is absolutely correct. Absolutely. Like, hallelujah. There we go.
You said that one of the problems with libertarians is that they're basically not willing to take stands in culture war issues. And I'm quoting from the show, if you can't state a preference between a child being raised by a parent or being dumped in daycare, why should anyone take you seriously as a person? This is one of the things I've been stressing for years now, and it's something libertarians need to learn. Libertarians need to learn their cultural lesson, or this whole movement is going to be in big trouble. It's not like families just decided they don't want to raise their children anymore. You had a second wave feminist movement largely funded by the government. Is that the message, in a cultural arena that you're going to bring to a kind of libertarian presidential run?
No,
okay. Yeah.
No, probably not. And I actually did a whole episode with Gene Epstein where we went back and forth in this quite a bit. And so there's a lot there to unpack. But I think that the message that libertarians should have about the culture war is in terms of like a presidential campaign is that we're the only ones who have an actual solution to the culture war, which is to call a truce. And that I think that the culture war essentially is driven by the size of government. And that as government gets bigger and bigger, everything becomes more and more political, and then everybody has to fight over who gets the power and rules over the other side for the next 4 years. So I'm happy to talk about it in terms of we can actually call a truce and just say, listen, if some people want to live the most conservative lifestyles and other people want to live the wildest lifestyles, then that's fine, and they should all be allowed to do that.
I agree with Banjo playing Bison, that libertarians need to stay out of the culture war. I get into this a lot on my interview on Unsafe Spaces, because it's not about the culture war. It's about the state. The culture war would be a non-issue but for the state. Because the state exists, there's a gun. And the only reason there's a culture war is because we're fighting for who has the gun. Remove the gun. I prefer to deal with the ultimate enemy, which is not people who culturally disagree with me. It's the state.
And that, yeah, we should be willing to fight against those.
What are those then?
More the idea that any disparate outcome is proof of systemic discrimination. I think that is incompatible with libertarianism. The idea that which is something that a lot of libertarians, Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman, had been railing against for decades, well before I was born. There are ideas such as that are at their heart, if not designed, then they certainly always lead 10 out of 10 times to demanding state solutions.
Is dropping your kid off at daycare one of those problems?
I think that society that has parents raising their children is much more likely to be a culture that's compatible with liberty.
Really? What's the evidence of that?
Well, the evidence of it is you could just look all around us. I think it's everywhere.
I don't know. Hillary Clinton was born and raised in a two-parent household.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying it's a 100% fix. So it's not a 100% fix on its own.
It seems I'm just thinking, like, isn't part of a libertarian or calling a truce in the culture wars then is not necessarily saying, this way of raising your kids is terrible, or this way of living your life is terrible. For me, and I think this is a point of true disagreement among us, is that, the idea is, as a libertarian, is that you can live however you want. You don't have a claim on other people's time or attention or approval, and certainly not their money. But
I certainly wouldn't say that I have a claim on other people's
Yeah.
lifestyles or that I can force them into one lifestyle or the other, but I can also notice reality and notice that the biggest governments always and intentionally undermine families, undermine communities, undermine churches, because if all of those forces are gone from society, then people become dependent on the state, and the state ends up essentially becoming those forces in people's lives. So I just think it's libertarians can have whatever cultural preferences they want to, as long as you don't want to enforce it on others, then you're a good libertarian.
Immigration is an issue that when I kind of joined the libertarian movement, when I, went on staff at Reason 27 years ago, something, immigration, like almost every libertarian I knew was essentially, if I don't know that anybody was open borders per se, but everybody was like, we should have more, we should basically, anybody who wants to move here and live and work legally should be allowed.
I want to stop before he continues. The LP, except for between the years of 2006 and maybe for 10 years after that, was explicitly open borders. So I don't know what he's talking about. He must not be talking about the LP, for instance, but we can go back through old platforms. The LP was against even having passports, which we should still be, or any ID, to be honest with you, mandated by the government. So I don't know what he's talking about, but let's continue.
Too. That seems to be a very controversial position, certainly in the Republican Party, somewhat in the Democratic Party, and increasingly in the Libertarian Party. You've talked about how that vision of immigration is
actually immigration. What does he mean by in the Libertarian Party? Maybe amongst certain rank and file, but our platform has gotten back to its older form of being pretty explicitly open borders. So I don't think he's correct in saying it's become increasingly controversial in the LP, at least not in the official positions of the LP.
Problematic because of a wide variety of existing government programs. How do you deal with that from specifically libertarian kind of perspectives?
Well, I think it's almost like the way I look at it is
that stops. I'm going to continue with that because here's where Dave and I very much disagree here. I believe consistent libertarianism requires you to be no particular orderism. He brings up a very interesting pushback, though, against no particular orderism, and I sure hope I extracted out that clip. But and he did cause me pause to think, well, is there an exception? But after I thought about it, I don't think so. But so I hope I extracted out that clip. But here's the biggest difference between Dave and I, is I'm a hardcore no particular orderist.
Like, well, obviously, I'm an ANCAP. So like an ideal situation.
What is the difference, by the way, between an anarcho-capitalist and a libertarian in your mind?
I don't think there is any difference. I think we are libertarians, and I think we are libertarians taken to its logical conclusion.
Okay, but are all libertarians ANCAPs?
No. No. I think there's libertarians like yourself who, minarchist, I guess, would be a decent term. Constitutionalist.
So like a night watchman state.
Yeah, sure. I think libertarianism is an umbrella term for all of those things.
And I agree. I don't know why Reason, of all things, would be asking him, what's the difference? What? And what? ANCAP as well, as you guys know.
But so in a way, it would kind of be, to me, almost like, and I've talked about this a lot on my podcast, where it's kind of like having a preference of what should be abolished in what order. So I think it's completely reasonable. No. I'm
not going to let you get away with that, Dave. It's not about having a preference. Everybody has preferences. No, we're not going to do that. It's about whether or not you would do X if the opportunity arose without having Y done first. The classic example, which he's going to bring up, is Would you open the borders while we still have the welfare state if you had the opportunity to do so? Not what your preference would be. My preference would be to get rid of the welfare state first if I could centrally plan liberty. But as a libertarian, like all libertarians should know, you cannot centrally plan liberty. It's not about preferences. It's about would you do it if the opportunity arose. Preferences, I don't give a shit about your preferences. What do I care about your preferences?
And let's say, who thinks that welfare should be abolished, that we should abolish the welfare state, to, let's say, in the middle of the lockdowns of 2020, and you were going to say, we're going to abolish all welfare right now, to say, well, wait a minute. You have to abolish the lockdowns first.
Okay, now he's not talking about preferences. So, is Dave saying, because I don't think he is, if he had the opportunity, it actually could happen that he could abolish all welfare in the middle of lockdowns? Would he actually have said, no, I will not agree to that unless you stop the lockdowns first? I don't really think he believes that. I think he would have jumped at the chance. But if he would not, this was his pushback against no particular orderism. And I don't think it's a valid pushback. Because, again, you cannot know. It's like the butterfly effect, right? You don't know if pushing something to what some people would consider as a terrible idea is not the very mechanism that will get you everything that you want. As the Radical Caucus says, opening the borders with a welfare state would crash the welfare state. Perhaps that's the only way we'll get rid of the welfare state. Because if you say we're not going to open the borders until we get rid of the welfare state, it is exactly what Tom Knapp called Stockholm libertarianism. You have a hostage, they have a hostage. Neither of one of you want to give up your hostages. Therefore, you've just assured that nothing gets done and you both get to evade responsibility. Nice work if you could get it. Meanwhile, I think consistent libertarianism says you strike at the root of the state wherever and however the opportunity presents itself, and you do not hold one positive reform hostage to another. So, in his example, if we abolished the welfare state while lockdowns were still going, perhaps that is the way the population would finally have found its balls and defied the lockdowns. You don't need to babysit people. So I don't think that was a pushback. I think sometimes allowing a reform to go through is the way you crash the whole thing. For instance, I have as traditional of a marriage as they get. Absolutely as traditional. And let me give you a specific example. I don't mean just that it's a man and a woman, we don't have an open marriage. We have like a trad marriage. The husband is the head of my household. That's my choice. However, I advocate for the most decadent types of marriages that you could find, and I say decadence with love because I call myself I'm a wannabe degenerate here. So I say the LP should be pushing for polygamous, as many partners as you want. And some people go, well, our legal system can't handle that. Yeah, that's the point. That's the way to crash the government being involved in marriage to begin with. Press it to its most logical extreme. And that's the way you'll crash the system. You cannot centrally plan liberty. And who are you to say, I think you should still be stolen from, in his welfare state example, because I don't like the order in which we're doing this? No, you don't have any right to play horse games with my rights. I don't care if you like the order or not. That's why no particular orderism, to me, is consistent libertarianism. And it is the sine qua non of the radical caucus. Just saying. That's the biggest difference, by the way, ideologically, between the Mises Caucus and the Radical Caucus, is the Radical Caucus's hard deontological adherence to no particular orderism. And the early LP was no particular orderist because Murray Rothbard was a no particular orderist. And when he was on the LNC, those of you might not know, Murray Rothbard used to be on the LNC. There's a resolution that was passed that's never been rescinded as far as I know that says the LP is no particular orderist. I should go find that old resolution. Okay, I'm going to continue.
And then abolish welfare, because you can't abolish welfare payments while you're not allowing people to work and take care of themselves, right? Like, I think that seems reasonable, that if working is illegal, then, and they're on welfare, we want to make it legal to work first, and then we can talk about abolishing the welfare.
And what you end up having then is both, Dave. Again, what we have here, folks, is a hostage situation.
Sports Illustrated. I was a long time subscriber to Sports Illustrated.
Okay, content warning. I know some people don't like those. I try to be courteous. Ben is going to do his typical anti-trans stuff. I don't care what anyone's view, whatever. I'm dealing with him on this for a different reason, because I just think he's tried too hard here, and his argument is stupid. But just fair warning, if that's not something you want to hear Ben rant about, you might not want to listen.
I will acknowledge that as a religious person, I always took the option, you can do this, of calling up Sports Illustrated and not getting the swimsuit edition, which was, basically material for teenage boys. I would always call.
Come on now, Ben. We all know you did what teenage boys do. I don't want that mental picture. God. Brain bleach. Stat. Brain bleach. Don't you love the way he had to virtue signal that I was the good Jewish boy? I didn't get my swimsuit edition. Dude, please. Come on.
Sports Illustrated and say add an issue to the end of my subscription and just don't send the swimsuit edition.
Okay, Ben. All right. You're me so holy. Oh, God. Okay, let's continue.
Now, Lena Bloom has had surgeries and hormone treatment and looks physically like a woman, right? Which, by the way, seems rather transphobic to me, because if you truly, Sports Illustrated, wanted to make the case that trans women are women, then trans women shouldn't have to look like swimsuit models. In fact, trans women, this seems fatphobic to me. Trans women should actually look like Laurel Hubbard. Why isn't Laurel Hubbard on the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition? The New Zealand weightlifter.
This is the stupidest argument that I've ever heard. Ben, are you claiming that since Sports Illustrated only puts a certain body type of biologically born women on its cover, that it is claiming that women who don't meet that conventionally attractive swimsuit model thing aren't women? Then why would you be surprised that they hold to the same beauty norms when putting a trans woman on the cover? It's not a political statement. Sports Illustrated puts women on the cover, be they cis or trans, that look good in a swimsuit. It's not that complicated. Sheesh.
Who's now going to be weightlifting in the Olympics and has more to do with sports than Lena Bloom. Why is it that only a trans woman who looks like a stereotypical swimsuit model in a low-cut bikini is now considered a fitting figure for the cover of Sports Illustrated? It seems very, very fatphobic, very transphobic, frankly, because it seems to suggest that the only trans women who ought to be treated as women are trans women who conform to all stereotypes regarding women.
That is the stupid. Then, Ben, by your logic, Sports Illustrated doesn't think women who don't look good in a swimsuit that are cis women aren't really women. But you don't think that. you're stretching because you decided that you had to get all pissed off, even though you said you don't even care for the swimsuit issue, and you certainly assured us you don't fap to it, that why do you care who they're putting on it? But your argument is just stupid. It's just dumb unless you're claiming that Sports Illustrated only think women, cis women, who look good in a bathing suit are the only women. And that's not what you think. So stop trying to make an issue where there isn't one. That issue isn't for you. Got it. It wouldn't have been an issue for you whether there was a trans or a cis woman, since you made it clear that you're far too holy to fap to Sports Illustrated.
I mean, Lena Bloom, my understanding is, has had all of the surgeries to fake female body parts. But as we know, that is to suggest that is a.
And I betcha some of the women, cis women, who have been on the cover might have had breast implants. Do you think Sports Illustrated is claiming they're not women? Do you think they're making any kind of a comment other than they look hot in a bathing suit? Stop trying to make a big issue out of what you've already admitted is a teenage boy fap issue, Ben.
Requirement of trans women to be treated as women is violative of their norms. It is violative of decency. So truly, Sports Illustrated has not gone far enough until Sports Illustrated suggests that red-blooded American males get used to the idea.
Ben, you don't speak for all red-blooded American males. The red-blooded American males who don't care for this issue cannot buy this issue. Problem solved.
Of a trans woman who looks exactly like a man. Because as we know, sex is really all in your head. Gender is really all in your head. And the person on the cover of Sports Illustrated shouldn't have to be a swimsuit model looking male.
Why not? It's the swimsuit edition. Generally, the swimsuit edition is going to have somebody who looks good in a swimsuit on it. This isn't that complicated. This is Ben Shapiro trying way too hard for content.
Masquerading as female. It should be a dude with twig and berries and chest hair and no fake breasts being treated essentially the same as a woman. That's when we know we've reached parity, I think. I think that's the really important thing. Now, look, the reason that Sports Illustrated is doing this is for the bleeps and giggles, right? They are doing it.
No, they're doing it for the greenbacks. They're doing it because they're going to make money at it. They're doing it for whatever reason they're doing it, and I don't care. It's their magazine.
To push forward the quote-unquote social justice agenda. The idea being that if they push forward a biological man on the cover of Sports Illustrated as a woman, and if you say, no, even if that biological man has had many surgeries and hormone treatments to look like a woman, that is still a biological man, that if you say that, then this means that you are somehow transphobic, or if you, even though that is the biological truth, or that you're mean and vicious. Look, Sports Illustrated's a free company, can do what it wants.
Okay, well, I guess we solved it. They're a free company. Move on, Ben. It isn't for you. I will say, I wish I looked as good as that trans woman on the cover. Damn.
That's right. It's a private company. But there is obviously a social attempt to normalize the idea that biological men who look like women are in fact women, which of course is a wild degradation of what it actually means to be a woman, a word with an actual definition. So it's pretty obvious what Sports Illustrated is doing here. But Sports Illustrated didn't stop there. So one of the other models on the cover of SI Swimsuit Edition is, of course, the tremendous Megan Thee Stallion.
Oh boy, here we go. Do I need to play the clip of you, Ben, admitting that you couldn't get your wife wet?
Because of her tremendous history with sports. According to Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition.
Well, Ben, Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition doesn't have shit to do with sports. And yeah, some people in comments had said they were pushing a social issue. Yeah, because they thought it would benefit them in some way. I don't care. And I think Ben's just reaching for comment here. He's just, his arguments are just dumb. Okay, so you can say they're pushing a social issue. Okay.
Megan Thee Stallion is no stranger to magazine covers, but the rapper and songwriter always dreamed of being on the cover of SI Swimsuit, which is a weird dream. She remembers as a young girl looking at the magazine and saying, one day, this is going to be me.
Okay. I'm going to continue. I just think Ben is reaching really, really, really hard. Yeah, corporations do social engineering. I'm not a fan of corporations. I said that earlier. I'm not a fan of the corporations doing social engineering, nor the government. But I don't think it was he was very reaching for the fact that he was causing some big stink over the fact that they picked a conventionally attractive trans woman.
A couple of decades later, the Houston native would have several Grammys under her belt and make history as the first rapper on the SI Swimsuit cover. And she is the perfect fit. Amazing. Amazing. And then finally, they have an athlete on the cover. So who's the athlete who's on the cover of Sports Illustrated?
Okay. Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition is not about athletics. It's about fat material, for the most part, from what I understand. But continued, I just know that Ben just has a hard-on about Megan Thee Stallion because of WAP and how he got humiliated. Oops. It was getting dumb anyway. What was the athlete? There was an athlete on there that he was getting all upset about, and I forgot who it was. Oh no. He was really bad here. I do want to play the rest of that. Let me find it.
A couple of decades later, the Houston native would have several. She just wouldn't do her media. After a blow up with the media,
Here we go.
Withdrew.
I want to try to find
it. Is Naomi Osaka. Now, you'll recall that Naomi Osaka withdrew from one of the tennis majors after a blow up with the media in which she just wouldn't do her media hits. And the ATP, the Tennis Professional Association, they said you need to do that. Right? It is your job. Part of your job as a tennis player is to deal with the media, because this is true in all sports. You're supposed to do the press conferences. And Naomi Osaka then went out and she claimed that she suffered from deep anxiety. Not diagnosed anxiety, just deep anxiety of dealing with the media.
Okay. So he's going to now question her whole... He's going to play... He's not a psychiatrist, but he plays one on TV type of thing. So he's really upset about this athlete who has some kind of anxiety disorder being featured by Sports Illustrated.
So strange that she doesn't want to take questions from, people who ask critical questions, but if you are doing a Sports Illustrated cover or a Time magazine cover, then all of a sudden all the hesitancy goes away. And by the way, it's not as though Naomi Osaka was being asked vicious, brutal questions. She was being asked questions about her performance as a tennis player. Says Sports Illustrated, Naomi Osaka is no doubt an athletic powerhouse at 23 shields, 4 Grand Slam titles, and is headed to Tokyo to compete in the Olympics. This comes after defeating former U.S. Open champion Samantha Stosur in her WTA Tour debut at just 16. It's her strength and power off the court that makes Naomi a true legend. She's raised awareness about racial injustice, human rights, and mental health, cementing her as one of the most outspoken professional tennis players. Outspoken except when she won't talk to anybody who, has a question.
Was that necessary, Ben? Apparently you do not understand how anxiety disorder works. And what do you care? What do you care? So she doesn't want to answer questions. Let's pretend she's completely faking it, that she actually just doesn't want to answer questions that are challenging to her. The market will either reward her or not, and what do you care? Why? I just think this is pretty classless, that you're deciding that someone else's anxiety has to manifest itself in a way that you find logically consistent. Let me tell you, mental health issues are not logical. That's why they're mental health issues.
Okay, fair enough. If you suffer from, I know people, I'm very close to people who have anxiety disorders that ought to be treated with kid gloves. You have to make provision for that, obviously. Naomi Osaka sort of suggested that that's what was going on. You know what people with anxiety disorders typically don't do? People who are shirking media attention, people who just want to stay away from the media and don't want to be involved with me. You know what they typically don't do? Pose for the cover of, I believe Time magazine has now done a cover on Naomi Osaka, and also Sports Illustrated.
What? Because she doesn't like getting grilled by the media, which is an entirely different stressor than posing for a picture. So I guess if you have anxiety, talking with people means you ought to just shut yourself in the house because you are somehow lying about your mental condition or being inconsistent or shirking your responsibility if you pose for the cover but won't be interrogated by the media. Fuck off.
When my wife and I start a conversation and she brings up a problem, I will ask her, is this a problem where you want
Okay, now Ben's getting to where I think he's making very good points. So I just mocked Ben for a while because, I think secretly he was very upset that he did want to fap to the trans woman. Honestly, I think that was the problem. He was attracted to her, was a very attractive trans woman, I will say, hot as hell. And then proceeding to make fun of and deciding that he gets to mental illness symptom some other person, okay? But now Ben's going to start to make an excellent point that we need to take on board as libertarians.
offer solutions, or is this a problem where you just want me to hear how you're feeling? And thankfully, my wife is rational enough to go along with that. And the reason this is useful is because if you're married, if you're in a relationship, you know that very often these two conversations get conflated. And that if you offer a solution in a feelings conversation, you are now considered unfeeling.
That is so true. Anyone here who's not married, let me tell you, men, the one thing that's going to piss off your wife, if she comes home and just wants you to listen, don't try to solve the problem. She's not asking you to solve the problem. She's just asking you to listen, okay? You will have a happy marriage if you just obey that one rule and, a few other things maybe. But that one thing, there's very few things more annoying to a woman than to just be emoting and then for your husband or significant other to go, well, what you could do to solve this problem, that's not what I was doing.
This happens in marriage all the time, right? Your wife comes home, she had a bad day at work, and she says, I want to tell you about all these problems I'm having at work. You say, what you could do is this, this, and this. And she says, that's not what I don't want to hear your solutions. I don't need your solutions. I know I can do those things. What I want is for you to just hear me. I just want you to hear. Now, politics is not supposed to be like that. And politics is supposed to be, here is a problem. Now let's figure out a solution. But politics is no longer about that. Because we are such an expressive society, and because we have wrapped up our own personal identities in our politics, this means that if somebody offers you a solution to your problem that fails to recognize your emotional state, that person is now a problem. That person is now an enemy. If that person engages in solutions talk rather than feelings talk, that person ought to be ostracized. That person is the problem.
That is so true. And this is what we're running into as libertarians right now. And this is why wokeism has infiltrated the LP. Because on paper, it seems like the most bizarre thing that the LP turned woke. Because there's very little that's more antithetical to individualism than the collectivism of wokeism. Yet here we are. Why? And it's because the radical individualism of libertarianism can seem, in today's culture, to lack empathy. For instance, when I said, I believe in something because it's right. No, you don't get to steal my money. I don't care what good things you want to use for it. You don't. It's unfortunate you have less money, but you still don't get to steal from me. That sounds very cold today. Logic isn't the number one political priority today. It's feelings. And I don't discount feelings because we're not robots. Feelings are important. But you need a healthy balance of logic and feelings. And when either is out of balance, you've got problems. And libertarians tend to be a little bit too heavy on the logic side and not enough on the empathy side, which means that in a political environment where everything's about feelings, we are going to look like shit. And people in the LP have become very painfully aware of that. So they're embracing the wokeism in order to shield themselves against the accusation that our philosophy can be cold, because it really does come down to being about you. But of course, if it's about you, it's also about them, as them being the you. You know, all individuals are a priority. But that's not in vogue today. So people have been very self-conscious about that and taken in the wokeism into the LP. Because we're not about solutions today. That's not it. It's about hearing the other person and coming up with a solution or an alleged solution to fix their feelings. Solutions don't fix feelings. You don't fix feelings with with solutions. You can listen. You can be a friend, but solutions can't be based on feelings. You can take feelings into consideration. It's almost like Nozikian side constraints, which, if you don't know what that is, I don't know if he used this analogy or I did, but it's to view your goal like a bowling alley where you want to get a strike, you know? So you want the solution that honors that is the greatest benefit to the greatest amount of people, correct? A utilitarian solution. However, you can't violate natural rights. Natural rights are the side constraints. They are the alleys. You don't want the ball to go into the gutter. It's the gutters. So within the two gutters, which are natural rights, you want to aim for a strike. But you can't get to the strike by scooting down the gutter, which is the problem in today's society, and why some libertarians very self-defensively have become woke, I think.
You can see this in a wide variety of areas in American life. It's particularly true when it comes to areas like race, for example. Right? Our great racial reckoning is not about coming up with solutions that actually boost the performance of, for example, black school children. It is not about that. It is not about coming up with policies that are best geared toward rectifying historic imbalances. It's not about that. What it is about is expressing the belief that the United States is bad, expressing solidarity with the belief that the United States is bad. And if you refuse to express that solidarity, then you're the problem. In fact, if you refuse to go along with the policy agenda, that is really just empathy in terms of policy. If you refuse to go along with that, then you're a bad person. The conflation of empathy with policy is one of the worst things that can happen in our political sphere, and it is happening each and every day because...
Agreed. But notice, at least I hope he's not saying, but let me make clear that I'm not saying. He said the conflation of empathy with policy. There's nothing wrong with empathy. We need it. But you can't conflate it with policy. You need to balance policy with empathy, but you can't conflate the two.
That means that people for whom you are empathetic deserve your help, and people for whom you are not empathetic do not. It also means that policy is simply supposed to be interpreted as a sign of empathy rather than as a measure of success or problem solving. And that is a real problem in American society. Okay, so let's talk about race for a second. Okay, so over the weekend, there were a couple of interviews about race and our quote-unquote racial reckoning that were quite telling and kind of fascinating. And again, policy has now been conflated with empathy, which creates two separate problems. One is that if your policy solves problems, but is not rooted in a belief that the person's feelings are justified, then you are unempathetic and bad. The policy itself is bad. So we judge policy by whether it is empathetic. Also, we judge whether you are empathetic by the policy you choose.
Now that's the problem. The other thing I don't really think is so much of a problem. I think policies do need to be empathetic. And I do think people's feelings are what they are. And they don't require your approval for them to be real. You don't have to necessarily say you agree with them, but people's feelings are their internal reality. But to judge somebody's empathy based upon the policy, not whether the policy works or not, that's where we're having the issues. And that's where the LP is having its identity crisis. Because society has determined that unless you are about stealing from people and giving to other people, then you are not empathetic. Just by virtue of the policy. Doesn't matter whether the policy would make all people actually better off. They've already determined what empathy is, and they will determine whether you're empathetic by the policy you choose, not by the results. Hello, Death. Glad to see you. For those who don't know why I'm saying that, sounds kind of creepy without the chat up. Ominous. Death says hello. So, back to the subject. I think that is really causing us fits in the LP. Is our policies have de facto been determined not to be empathetic, because it's been de facto determined you're only empathetic if you're willing to sacrifice the individual to the collective.
If you choose a policy that is not rooted in empathy, you are bad. So there are two separate problems with conflating empathy and policy. One is bad policy, and one is the targeting of people who disagree with you on policy as non-empathetic. And both of these things are now a routine part of American politics, and it helps explain why so many Americans hate other Americans based on their political viewpoint. Because you might think...
Same thing in the LP. Why is there such hatred in the LP? I really do think Ben is more dealing with the broader culture, and he certainly isn't thinking about the LP at all. But I think what he is saying is very important for us to understand, because we need to figure out how collective wokeism infiltrated the party of the individual.
Yourself, wait a second, there are usually more than one way to skin a deer here. Like there are a couple of different ways to approach...
Is Ben a cat person? He was so reluctant to say skin a cat.
This problem. I'm offering a solution. You offer another solution. We don't seem to be able to come to an agreement about that, but why don't we try and see whose solution is better? That's not how politics is done anymore. The overt conflation of empathy and policymaking, it's the worst thing for both empathy and policymaking. It makes you less empathetic to people who think not like you, and it makes your policy worse because your policy is now just an expression of how much you care. Okay, so when it comes to race, you can see this most of all, because there are certain policies that are likely to facilitate, for example, better performance.
Okay, continue.
There's not a single human being who has ever implemented a policy on planet Earth who believed they were implementing an evil policy. The most evil people on the planet right now, today, believe they are implementing policy that quote-unquote helps people.
This is an important point for when we're talking to non-libertarians, because we will often say, oh, but that violates the non-aggression principle, or you're initiating aggression against us. Most people do not see themselves as aggressors. They do not understand that what they are advocating is aggression. So we need to move beyond the libertarian speak, because we're saying something that they have not yet taken on board. Most aggressors do not view themselves as aggressors, particularly political aggressors.
It is not about intent. It is not about empathy. It is about whether the policy is in effect good and whether the policy can be morally justified on the basis of respecting individual human beings. Let's say that you wish to convince people that they ought to get vaccinated. So I found out recently that a lot of people in our office, people I work with, are not vaccinated. As you know, I'm a very large-scale proponent of vaccination. I've been a proponent of vaccination since the beginning. I've been a proponent of vaccination since way before COVID. It's one of my more controversial views among conservatives. I'm very pro-vaccination. Okay, but a lot of people in this office didn't get vaccinated. They're independent, free human beings. If I wanted to get them vaccinated, I would treat them as independent, free human beings. I would mention the fact that COVID has higher risk factors than getting the vaccine by all available data for people who are above the age of 18, for sure. For people who are above the age of 12, that seems to be the case as well. Okay, and that being the case, you now get to make an independent and free decision. But this is not how people of the left are approaching the problem. The way they're approaching the problem is that if you didn't get the vaccine, it's not because you made a differential risk-reward calculation for which you ought to bear the consequences. Notice, my solution also not only encompasses treating people as individual free human beings, it also suggests that you ought to bear the consequences of the risk you are taking. If you choose to take a risk, bear the consequences. Same rules for everybody. Same exact rules for everybody. I got the vaccine, my wife got the vaccine, my parents got the vaccine, and now we bear the risk of the vaccine. And if you don't get the vaccine, you bear the risk of the vaccine. Same rule for every single human being. And you get to make that decision yourself because you're a free, independent human.
But equity society doesn't believe in the same rules for everybody. And that is the fundamental problem we are dealing with as libertarians, where we should believe in the same rules for everybody. And that just is seen as evil, as non-empathetic. And people like to see how they view themselves reflected back at them. But when the general society reflects back at a libertarian that you're just a selfish, awful person, in a self-defensive way, sometimes we will twist things around in order to see reflected back at us something different. That is just human nature. Nobody likes to be told that they're terrible.
But the way the left treats this is you're morally inferior if you didn't get the vaccine. Not just that you're an idiot, but you're endangering other people's lives. You're a bad person. Now, even if you believe that that's the case, is that the way to treat fellow human beings? Really, like on a serious level, is that the way that you think you're going to convince them to do things? Remember, the guy who shouted at Tucker Carlson was not interested in convincing Tucker Carlson to change his opinion. He was interested in virtue signaling to all of his friends. This is the same thing in the media today. It's the same thing from, for example, Anthony Fauci. Right? So Anthony Fauci, the great and sainted, second greatest doctor in America after Dr. Joe Biden, he says, maybe we should blame people. Maybe that.
Yeah, that is, we came full circle to that obese lady screaming, right? And I think that might be the last clip. If I accidentally disconnect us, I apologize. But I want to test something here. Nope, that's not anything. Yep, that was the... Whoa! Whoops, I almost closed it. All right, so... Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to get all up in the camera like that. Okay, that's it. This was a marathon. This was 2.5 hours. This was a marathon. I am tired. Okay, well, I got through a bunch of clips. I got to find that King Pill clip because God just taught me a lesson of shooting my mouth off and then not having the goods to back it up. I promise that will be next time. And again, we dealt with an awful lot of topics here. I noted in chat there were some disagreements. I am not going to play the culture war game that says if you disagree with me, you're a bad person. We just have different opinions. I think some of my more socially conservative people saw more of my left side today, and that's fine. I've always told you that I am center left. But we can agree to disagree agreeably and not think each other is terrible people. Drywall, oh, thank you so very much for the super chat. I so appreciate it. This has been a haul for me. And Death, thank you for saying you'll rewatch. This has, again, been a long episode. I am now going to spend time with my husband and try to relax. But this has been actually very relaxing. It's been a very stressful week for me. I just need to stay away from the LNC people until this term is over because it's not good. It's not good for their mental health and it's not good for mine. I've been so stressed. But thank you, everyone. And yes, Jacob, still going, but we just finished. We just finished. And I will see you guys soon. And I hope you have an awesome night. I think I'm going to be playing my patron thing. And I messed something up where it's not going to close with my normal closing. But close enough.